he came knocking on my front door and he said, "Would you please teach me?"
Okay, everybody, today is July 14 at 2 p.m. in California, and today we have some very, very special guests. It is an honor to have him on the show. This is somebody who is extraordinary in his industry, and everybody looks up to him in town. And so this individual his name is Shifu David Chang. He has grown his martial art academy from a humble beginning in his parents' garage to a successful enterprise, teaching 850 students and growing. So he is preparing to launch his next location later this year. So I'm so excited to bring him on the show, and he's going to tell you all about the success, the success, the pitfall, and how to overcome it, and how he got started. Right. So this is a very, very special episode. So stay tuned. Shifu David Chang, can you introduce yourself and just tell us, who you are and how you get started?
Hi, it's such an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me, Daniel. So, so my company is Wushu Central Martial Arts Academy, and we have locations in San Jose and Palo Alto, and we're getting ready to open a third one. Location as of yet undisclosed, but hopefully that'll be news that we can share at some time in the near future. We are a martial arts academy. And the funny thing is, most people think of a martial arts teacher as not making a very good living, right? The typical, the stereotype is Johnny from Cobra Kai, right? Living in a terrible, apartment with a broken refrigerator and eating spoiled food, but really what we've done for, obviously, certainly for myself, but also for our entire team here, is create a business and a company that our team can thrive in, that they can make a good living in, they can do something that they really love to do every single day they come here, and they can make a really positive impact on the world and the people that they touch.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people talking about martial art, you're right. I mean, I never knew that a martial art academy can be this successful. And then I looked into it. It's like it's not just martial art, because I was on your website, right? I'll just share the screen right now. Your website is talking about turning children into successful adults, right? And the martial art and the classes in the Wushu Academy is the vehicle to do that, right? But the outcome is we're really talking about turning children into successful adults here, right? And I love that spin, and it's resonating as a parent, it's resonating with me, and I felt like I'm obligated to do this for my child, right? So can you tell me a little bit more about the early days, when you first started out? How did you get started into this business, and what was it like to kind of went out to rent your own first space?
Yeah, so I didn't start off wanting to become a martial arts teacher. As a matter of fact, I grew up wanting to become a doctor. And throughout my childhood and even to college, that was the track I was directed towards. Got really, really good grades and test scores in high school, and went to UC Berkeley, studied biology. I was on the pre-med track, and that was going to be my future. Very set into it. Took the MCAT, the medical college admission test, did well on it, double-digit scores, ready to start interviewing. I had started interviewing, but at the same time, I also was working at a local hospital because I wanted to get experience in the medical field before actually going to medical school. Now, throughout my childhood, that sort of at my teen years as a child, and particularly when I was in college, I got really, really, really into the martial arts. UC Berkeley has a wonderful school-funded martial arts program, probably one of the best in the nation. And that's where I really started studying Wushu. And I got very serious about it. I was practicing almost every day, started competing. I even traveled to China to enhance my training, started competing heavily, won quite a number of championships. And so it was a huge part of my life and I loved it. And I remember working at the hospital, chatting with the doctors there and the nurses. And I always talk about the martial arts because, of course, it was my favorite topic in the world. And I remember one of the doctors sitting down with me one day and say, Dave, I can tell you really love martial arts. If you really love martial arts, you should just go do martial arts instead of trying to become a doctor. And then he whispered, you'll probably make more money doing that anyways. And this is coming from a doctor.
Right? That is hilarious.
So, so it was really sort of a moment where I really had to stop and think about what was the direction I was going in and why I was doing it. And it made me really realize that I like medicine a lot. I really like what it does and how it helps people, but I love martial arts, right? Martial arts is the one thing that I do for fun and I would do anyways, even if I wasn't getting paid for it. It's such an important part of my life. So that was sort of one of the pivot points for me and deciding maybe this is really what I meant to do. And I was still competing in tournaments, and one of my kid brother's best friends came and watched me at the tournament. And I won that particular tournament. And the next day, I think he came knocking on my front door and he said, "Would you please teach me?" And he became my first student. So I started teaching him and started teaching my kid brother at the same time. They brought in a friend from school. So I had 3 students and we put up a website, and then people started joining in. They started referring more people. And before I knew it, we had about 25 people stuck into my parents' garage trying to learn Wushu. It was so tight. And at that point, we really made that big leap decision to say, let's do this for real. Let's get a real space here. Let's make this big. Let's try to grow this as a real academy. So we did, and that's where we got our start.
Wow. What was your neighbor thinking? I'm curious.
It's really funny. So neighbors not in a big a deal, but because we live in single family homes, they're fairly separated, so there's not a noise issue. However, we got so stuffed that we in our space that we went outside to practice, and we lived in a court, and so we'd go into this middle of the court and we'd be out there with and as you may know, Wushu uses a lot of weapons, right? So we have swords and staffs and everything. No. And so we're practicing out there, and next thing you know, a police officer comes driving up, right, and stops, and then they're parked on the curb, next to us. And we're a little bit nervous, like, oh my gosh, like, is this going to be an issue? We're going to get in trouble. So, we go up to the officer, say, "Oh, hi, officer. Hi, can I help you with anything?" And he just said, "No, just watching." Right. And then he watched us for a while. It looks like he was just being, either entertained or just want to make sure we're not doing anything too fishy. We saw that we were, not bothering anybody, practicing, safely. And so after a while, they stopped watching. They just drove off, and that was it. So actually really didn't have any problems with neighbors or with the law.
Yeah, I think if I were your neighbor, I would like, what is he doing with a bunch of people with weapons flying around, jumping around, like, that was just something to make. What's going on, Dave? Tell me.
I'm sure they were wondering.
Okay, so it's great. So how quickly did you fill your garage with 25 students?
That probably happened within less than a year. I'd probably estimate. We're talking a very long time ago, over 20 years ago. But I probably think it was roughly around maybe 6 to 8 months before we were pretty full.
So were you like part-time working, and like, what was your financial like? Because obviously the first few months, like, it's not gonna make money for you to stay home and focus on it. Like, how did you finance it? How did you balance that? And did you have to work a job and part-time and?
Yeah, so I was still working at the hospital. So
Okay.
that was kind of bringing in the money for me. The garage was provided free by my parents.
By parents.
So I didn't have to worry about rent And I would say one of the real advantages that I had was I had very supportive parents, very, very supportive parents. Imagine I'm Chinese, right? Imagine the conversation, mom, dad, I want to give up going to medical school to become a martial arts teacher instead.
Man.
But surprisingly, my parents were very, very supportive. And I think because they've always been fascinated with entrepreneurship, they were never successful in starting a business, but I think it intrigued them that I might be the first one in the family to actually be able to do it. And I remember asking my father years and years later, once we had already gotten big, and I said, remember when I asked about giving up medical school? Why did you say yes? And he told me, I could tell how passionate you were about it. And my feeling of the matter was that as long as you were that passionate, you were going to be able to be successful in it. Didn't matter what it was. It was just that if I wanted it enough, I would make it happen. I think I could have told him I want to be a garbage collector, and he probably would have said, "Okay, you go out there, and maybe next thing you know, you're going to own the garbage company."
Something like that. That's great, man. That's amazing how, your parents were so understanding. They see the passion that you have, and they believed in you, right? They believe, that you are going to be successful in this because you show so much passion in it. And you just, were relentless, and like you just gave it 100% every single time. And I think for a lot of, I would say, young entrepreneurs, right? Because I were a young entrepreneur, and I, left my job in Silicon Valley, and it was the worst decision that my parents thought I made, and started my own business. And they were not supportive of me, and nothing against that. It's just like I wasn't good enough. Honestly, my first business failed, right? My second one failed, right? And that, maybe that's why, like, for them at the time, it's like maybe it's better off just like working a job and not starting on your own. But I guess it's different because you just had so much passion, and just like you were all in on this thing. So at what point? So 25 people, you moved out of the space. What was your monthly like revenue at the time? Like 25 people in the garage. Like, what was your monthly revenue at the time?
Oh goodness, with 25 people in the garage, I mean, you're looking at quite little. I mean, something at that time probably around like $2,000 a month. Certainly not enough to pay rent at a location. So when we moved into our big location, we are of course in the red. So very, very quickly we got things together to start recruiting as many people as we can. And what's really nice about it is when we made this decision to go into this big space, I got all my students together. I said, hey, listen, we can make a choice right now to make this big and go into it, get a real space, get a real academy, and we can grow this. But I need your support. If I do this, I need all of you guys to get out there and help grow the school. And so that's one of the things that happened, right? Is when we opened, now everybody started telling and promoting our academy to all their friends, all the people they knew. And so we actually started growing very, very, very quickly. And probably within the first 6 months, we had already surpassed 100 students.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we had a pretty remarkable pace of growth, and I think it was because our students, everybody was so supportive. And there's another factor here that really helped us, and that was I met and married my wife. And my wife comes from a family of entrepreneurs. They own a chain of very successful restaurants. They own commercial property. Before that time, they were doing residential property. So she came in and filled in a lot of my business knowledge gaps. Because I was a great martial artist, right? I knew everything about martial arts. I knew nothing about business.
Yeah.
Okay. So she really came in and really helped me understand, like, you can't do things this way. You're not running this like a little club with your group of friends. You're growing an enterprise. And so these are the components and things you need to be thinking about, right? Thinking about the customer service experience, right? You're not here to run a dungeon. You're here to serve the community. And so what we teach and how we present has to has to meet the needs of our customers, not forcing our customers to adapt to what I want to teach necessarily, but finding how what we can adapt what we do to really serve those people the best. And so that was a huge pivotal shift. And once she kind of came into the company, then we really started to skyrocket.
Wow, like I want to point out something really important that like you mentioned earlier, that you you had your student went out there and helped you just like 5x the amount of subscription, the amount of student enrollment, and you
Yeah,
did it in a team. It wasn't like me. It's like this is us. You know, if you want as much as me, you know, it is us. It's teamwork, and you just give them a mission. You know, they believed in you too. So I'm sure
yeah,
this 25 student was a true believer. They believed in the Wushu training. They believed in the martial art you're training them, and they believe that it is important for other people to do the same thing. Like you installed
for
that
sure.
belief in them. So you know that's why in 6 months you had over 100 student enrollment, and it just went on like it's just like a storm. You know, just moving so quickly because you had the strong like mission statement, right? And you had
Mm-hmm.
a strong follower, and they believed in you, and you were their leaders. And then after you got the space, now 6 months into the space, you were, you know, 100 plus student enrollment. And is this the time that your wife come in about 6 months to kind of help you and you know operate the business in like financial sound and things like that?
I met her probably about 3 months, maybe actually just about 2 months into opening the business. And then she really started helping with the business probably, about 2 or 3 months after that. So I would say that, we probably at the time that she really started helping the business, we were probably around 70 students. And then once she started helping and really advising me, and actually she became one of our teachers as well too. She became an instructor, so she became very pivotal in developing the curriculum and finding like, hey, you have students quitting right now at this point in their development. Why is that the case? We need to figure out what we're doing wrong and fix that. And so she came in to really start teaching the classes in a way that was much better than the way I had been doing. And so that was really, really helpful. But once she came in, then we essentially, from the time that from the beginning, to the time she came in, we got to about 75 students. And then once she came in, over the next couple years, we grew to about 250 with her help.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like she came in just the right time with the coaching and the helping in the business just when you were just like a sponge, right? You're just trying to grow and trying to figure out all this marketing stuff and making an offer,
Uh-huh.
things like that, and sales process and a sales
Yeah.
funnel, things like that. So who what was your method in at this time, 100 plus student, right? She was helping you in the business. What were your best growth method to get new enrollment at the time?
Yeah. So I think that one of the most important concepts for marketing that people have to understand is it's not one marketing method and you just get all your customers. Actually, it's almost like a shotgun approach. You kind of have to create a multiple pillar approach to your marketing. So you have your website, right, which you should be always focusing on SEO optimization and trying to get it ranked as high as possible on Google. You have your referrals, right? Ways that you promote and you ask your customers to refer more people into it. You have your digital advertising, right? Whether that be Google ads or Facebook ads. You may have print ads. You maybe have postcards or flyers that you're mailing out to people. So there's all these different ways of marketing. It's important that you're utilizing many of them, not just one, for a couple of reasons. Number one, that usually you're going to have some positive effect from each different marketing method, but also marketing is always a moving target. And it's really easy for the one thing you're doing to break, right? So if all you did was Facebook advertising in 2020, and then all of a sudden iOS 14 hit, right? And you realize that your ads just plummeted in effectiveness, right? Now you have to figure out what that pivot's going to be, right? But if you have multiple streams already of marketing, then it's much easier rather than just to throw in a panic like, I don't know what to do now. We have to figure out what we're gonna, how we're gonna market now. So I think that's one. So marketing effectively and using multiple ways of doing it. And then number two, having a really strong sales process. A lot of people really drop the ball when it comes to actually converting a lead into an actual customer. And they do that in a couple of ways. Number one, a lot of people don't really understand the value of a lead when it comes in. And so they get a lead, in whatever way it is, whether it's through their website or a phone call or a referral, and they sit on it, right? They wait. They don't reach out to that person for sometimes days. And I think part of that comes from a lack of sense of urgency, but I think a lot of it comes from fear because they're afraid to kind of make contact, call that person up, invite them in for that introductory lesson or whatever happens to be in your particular business, right? But they're afraid to kind of go start that sales process with them. You have to be very comfortable with sales, I think, in business. You have to be comfortable with presenting what you have to offer and then asking, to convert that person into a paying customer. So I think that's really, really important. So for us, it's really being very, very, very diligent and very quick about a lead comes in. We want to contact them as soon as possible. Don't wait, right? If we can call them within 5 minutes, that's ideal. We actually try to do that if we can. It develops such a great customer experience too, right? If you go on a website, you put your information here, I'm interested in the martial arts classes, and then within a minute or two, ring, ring, someone calls you, that gives the customer such a sense of confidence in your business, how responsive these people are. They're on top of it, right? So later on as a customer, if I have any sort of questions or issues, I'm going to be able to expect that same level of quick response and service. So that's the first. And then having a good way to convince that person to come in and see the class, try a class, and then providing a really wonderful first-time experience for them, right? So when they come in the door, they're greeted warmly, by name, ideally, right? Not just, oh, how can I help you? What are you here for? It's actually when someone comes in, hi, you must be Daniel. It's nice to meet you. And this must be your son, Johnny, right? And, and then launch it from that position of strength. And then give them a really wonderful experience so that by the end of that first class experience, they're like, oh my gosh, this place is incredible. And the parent is excited and the child is really excited. They had so much fun. And they're really excited. They want to enroll at that point. And at that point, it's not sales anymore. It's so easy, right? Because they can't wait to enroll in your program.
Wow. That's a lot of information to unpack. So there's a couple of things that I want to point out based on what you mentioned. The marketing channels, right? And you're so right about that. Like, just don't, as a brick and mortar, right? We don't have the leisure of doing just one thing. Like, we got to get the traffic, the phone calls to ring every single day consistently on, from local SEO, from your website, from pay advertising, from the local magazine coupon, the coupon direct mails, right? You're going to be on all fronts, not just one, two, but on all social or all marketing channel, but consistently too. Because it's not like a month thing, you turn it on for like a month, didn't work out, Facebook ad didn't work, right? But it's like a consistency thing, right? So you got to have a budget for it and you got to spend on it, right? It's like nurturing like a tree, when you plant a tree and you can water for years before it yields fruits. So I think like the number one is like the marketing on channel. Number two is consistency. Like, give it time, Like, I keep telling a lot of people that, even my own clients, like, you got to give it time, like at least 90 days before you even look at the data, if it makes money or not. Like the 90-day time frame, it's enough time for you to tell something about, is this a good offer or not? Like, is it converting? Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, especially when you're in like the local market and you want to be the local reputation. Like, you want as much eyeball, as much people talking about you when you're not around as much as possible. And you want to make sure those conversations are positive, right?
For sure.
And also like that's like the marketing, right? And you also talk about the sales process, which is so overlooked by so many businesses. Like, it is so important to have a dial-in sale process. As soon as a lead opt in, like you said, you got to call them right away. And then when they come into your brick and mortar location, they're greeted, and the sales process has started the moment they walk through the door. Right? Everything has to be like a play by play now. All your employees know exactly what to do, like where they're gonna go and what you're gonna talk about, what you're gonna show them. So like, how did you figure that out? I want to ask the peers, like that's like very like dial in. Who taught you this, or how did you figure out that sales process? Because
Yeah. So, I've been fortunate to have a number of very, very good mentors. And one of my mentors was a gentleman named Tommy Lee on the East Coast, and he runs a very successful martial arts, enterprise. And I became one of his clients, his coaching clients, because I saw that he was amazingly successful. I had worked with some of the material that he had published into the industry. I purchased it, used it, found it to be very, very insightful and very useful. And I thought, I should really learn more from this man. So I think mentorship is really important. And so he really walked me through and taught me a lot of what I know now, and still a lot of the practices that I still use today, about how important some of these things are. So yeah, definitely, I think it helps to find good mentorship.
that's like, so important, but then again, people think, oh, I don't need a coach, I'm just a small business owner, right? But at what point of this in your career you knew you had to get a coach, you had to call Tommy Lee, you had to seek out for coaching? At what point did you had that like, flip, like I need to do this?
It didn't take very long, and I think probably literally maybe before the first year was up. And it's not that we weren't growing, but I just always felt like, okay, there's a lot I don't know, there's a lot I don't understand, and I felt that weakness in myself, right? That I was guessing and trying a lot of things, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think this just comes maybe from a martial artist mindset. I think of it this way. Sometimes I talk to the martial arts business owners, and I say, look, you don't have a coach for business, right? Okay, well, did you learn your martial arts from a really good teacher, or did you pick it up from Sensei YouTube? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like how did you get so good in your martial art? It's because someone taught you, right? You wouldn't have gotten there without great instruction. So I felt the same way about myself in this, in this area too. And like I said, my wife Liz, awesome in business, but her business was restaurants and properties. So she had a lot of knowledge that carried over, but there's some knowledge that are specific towards martial arts. That's why actually together we saw, other instruction, and we went together. We went to the seminars. We flew over to the East Coast together and spent time, with my coach over there and learning the ins and outs, and then really came back and started implementing, and then, and then we launched even, faster at that point onwards.
Wow. So, man, this is amazing, because I've spoken to so many business owners, and they're looking at coaching is a cost, right? It's cost, so much money. I don't want to do that. Yeah, but they're not seeing the outcome. What if it works, right? What if this coach stuff that he's teaching really work, and it's just going to skyrocket my business, right? Like I also have many coaches I've invested in, and the biggest takeaway is like, it's okay to not know everything. Like you said, like I don't know anything. I don't know much, but I had to figure it out. And I thought that, there's always more, right? So I found the person that did it the best, and I just pay him for coaching, so that he can give me the resources I can, use on my day-to-day basis. So I think would you say the coaching is the best investment, like the best decision that you made that took your business to where you are today?
Oh, 100%. Yes. Every single time I paid for coaching in any form or another, it's always had a positive return on investment. And typically, 3x, 5x, 10x, 20x, right? What I paid. Sometimes people, are scared when I talk about, oh, how much did I pay for coaching this year? And yeah, it's in the 5 figures, right? That's how much we paid. It's like, but the return that we get for it makes that amount that I pay obsolete, right? It makes it insignificant, I should say. So I think a lot of people are afraid to pay for coaching, and I understand it from a small business mindset. You don't have a lot of money to pay. So if someone says, okay, this coaching is going to cost you $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, a lot of people, they say that's so much money, right? That's so much money. I don't think I can afford it. It's that's going to be my entire month's take home and that kind of thing. Maybe not realizing that you spend that $5,000 today, you're going to get $50,000 back, right? If I made you a deal and I said, you give me $5,000 and I'll give you $50,000, how much money would you give me? You'd give me all of your money, right?
Yep.
Why wouldn't you, right? You're printing money. So, that's so important for people to sort of have that larger mindset and to be like, hey, there are people who know more than I do and can really help me accelerate my growth. So, do it. Otherwise, you're sort of dooming yourself to sort of the slow plod, hopefully forward, but, a slow plod where you can really get to this level so much faster.
Yeah, I think I just want to share a quote that my mentor taught me. He taught me the cost. He asked me, well, do you know what is the biggest cost in life? And in my mind, I was like, taxes. And he's like, wrong. I said, oh, okay, what is it? He's like, well, the biggest cost in life is the cost of lack, because the cost of not knowing how to make $1 billion a year, the cost of not knowing how to make $1 million a year, the cost of not knowing how to make $1 million a month passively. That is the biggest cost because you don't know how to do it. Not saying that's impossible. There are people who do that, So I think if you, like you said, if you just look at the biggest cost in life is not knowing how to make 6 figures a month for your brick and mortar business, right? I think the 6 figure a month is the holy grail, like any brick and mortar business have to hit, right? To be able to somewhat have some money to, live nicely, right? And have some employees. But I think most businesses struggle to pass 50,000 a month and just kind of stuck there, right? And they just couldn't pass it. Then 20 years go by, here you are, still there, right? You just wasted half your life, So it's so important that you took coaching and just continue as not just one coach, right? You just one coach and then another coach and just like an education of lifelong education, of learning. It never stops. Mm-hmm. So it's so important you reinvest in that every year. I'm going to get this coach next year. It's consistency in that too.
For sure. Yeah. Every person I know who's been very, very successful in business has always relied on coaching. Nobody does it alone. You'd ask any of the major CEOs of all the most successful CEOs of all the biggest companies, they all have coaches themselves. They all, are part of a mastermind where they learn ideas from one another. Nobody knows everything. Nobody's good at everything, right? So you have to rely and you need to bring these other people into your life so that you can learn from them.
Yeah, that's great. So, we talked about, your past, how you got started, your present, and then now you did tell me a little about your opening your location, it's in the development. So talk to me about your future growth, right? Where do you see, yourself doing, maybe 5-10 years from now? And where do you see your business, 5-10 years from now?
Yeah. So, our dream is to really take what we do here and positively impact as many people in the world as possible. And really what that means is taking what we do and creating a nationwide brand out of it. Because I think what we do is so powerful. One of my favorite stories is one of my students, a little boy that I taught, and he first came to our academy when he was probably around 5 or 6 years old. His name is Samrit. And Samrit, when he came in for his first introductory lesson, I personally did his first introductory lesson, and he was so shy. He was crying, and he actually cried for the first few days of classes with us. And not only was he very lacking in confidence and so anxious, but physically he was quite weak. He had very low muscle tone, very poor balance, uncoordinated, poor flexibility. And that's actually why his parents brought him to us. And so we really approached this child with a sense of mission that we were not going to give up. We were going to do everything we could to really help this child succeed. And so we worked on it very hard, a lot of positive encouragement, right? Really not letting him give up and us not giving up on him. And, you know, maybe not so surprisingly, it took him some time, but eventually he got better and he got stronger and he got more coordinated. He gained confidence. And then eventually he did it. He attained his black belt. It was a really awesome moment for him because he worked so hard for it. And a couple of years after that, I remember him saying, "Hey, Shifu, I would like to actually learn how to become a teacher." So I invited him into our leadership training program, started teaching him those leadership fundamentals and skills, and he became one of our instructors. It became actually a paid job for him while he was in high school. And he was awesome because he would be in front of a class and he would look out at this group of children out there and he'd find that one child who was feeling very anxious and scared. He'd go right to that child and he would help that child in because he knew what it felt like. He had empathy for them. A couple of years after that, he was applying for colleges. He asked me to write his letter of recommendation. I wrote him a very strong letter of recommendation. He got accepted into Dartmouth. So he's there now. We actually, if you go on our Wushu Central's YouTube channel, you actually watch an interview that I had with him.
Yeah.
And he really talks about how this really changed his life. So that was one of the moments talking to him that made me realize that what we do has such a profound positive impact on children that we have a moral obligation to take what we know and then what we do and get it to as many people as possible, because we can really change the world by doing it. And so now at this point, we're really looking at growing our impact, scaling it as large as we possibly can. So over this next year, of course, yes, we want to open up another location, maybe 2 more locations, right? And the year after that, let's see if we can open 3 or 4. We want to first start by dominating the entire Bay Area. And then we want to now then move it throughout California. And then it's time to kind of go east and try to get into every major metropolitan area in the country. I think that what we have to offer is so helpful and so important to children. It teaches them skill sets and life lessons that it's very hard for them to learn elsewhere. And our belief is that if a child can be taught the life skills that we teach, they will be successful in anything they want to do, whether they go to school or whether they want to go into opening a business or whether they want to do anything else, that they're going to be able to be successful because it teaches them fundamental character qualities that make them winners and make them leaders.
Man, if you're coming to SoCal, my kid's going to go to your Wushu Academy for sure. That was such a good story, man. That was such a good story. And I absolutely see like the passion, like that, Sam, the young man that, you trained in, he just grew into such a successful adult. And he were, so different than how he started, right? That change just kind of inspired you to kind of, let's do more. Let's transform more kids like Sam, right? Man, that's awesome. And I wish you the best. So now, I think, if a final question is, if for anyone who's looking to kind of get started or if started in infancy stage, what would be some tips for them to kind of like, get to the next level?
Yeah, so it really kind of depends on where they are. But let's say it's someone who just has a beginning of an idea, right? The first thing I always say is, first of all, don't hesitate and just start doing it. Sometimes people take too long. They try to create the perfect idea, the perfect product before they get started. Actually, I say, start now and start making mistakes, right? And understand that making mistakes is going to be part of that process. Go ahead and make mistakes. Don't be afraid of those mistakes. Actually embrace them, right? Learn to love your mistakes. We've been around for almost 20 years now. We're going to hit our 20th anniversary, I think, in about half a year. And, people say, oh, you're so successful. You must be so smart, such a genius. I'm saying, you don't understand. You're looking at about 19 and a half years of mistakes. Right? It's not that I got everything right. Actually, I did more wrong than right. It's just that every time I hit something wrong, it's like, oh, okay, whoops. Okay, let's change it and let's do it differently. And we just keep going forward in that direction. And I think the earlier you start making mistakes, the better, because you start learning and figuring it out as you go. So I would say number one thing is to get started with whatever you want to do right away, even if it's small. don't worry, just start doing it. And then the second thing I would say, as soon as possible, really start looking at other people who have been successful in your industry or in doing something that's tangential to what you are doing, right? And where there can be some life lessons, some ideas that you can glean from them. The more experience you have in talking to people who, have run successful businesses, the better off you're going to be. You want to surround yourself with these kind of people. Don't surround yourself with people who are at your level. Surround yourself with people who are above your level. So if you're like, hey, I really want to make 6 figures and you're currently making, half of that. Well, don't spend your time hanging out with people who are making the same income as you. Start hanging out with people who are making 6 figures, right? If you're making 6 figures and you want to make 7 figures, well, okay, then you need to start hanging out with the people who are making 7 figures, right? That's how you start to absorb their mindset and their knowledge.
Well, Shifu, David, Chang, it was such a great episode. I learned so much already. I'm sure all the listeners learned so much. So, if anybody listening, you have your kid or yourself in the Bay Area, I would highly recommend check out, WushuCentral.com. That's how you can get in touch with Shifu, David, Chang. And, if you want to send your kids, put in your information in the opt-in form and somebody will reach out and somebody will, bring you in to kind of get your journey started. Okay, well, this is it for this episode and look forward to the next one. I'll see you guys next time.